Up on this episode, a crazy day of NBA action yesterday, culminating in a 134-120 victory for the Warriors that has them inching towards the 8th seed with just 3 games remaining. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast after a huge 14-day slate of NBA action on Tuesday or Wednesday, my time here in Australia. Plenty of storylines to come from it, obviously, but the 2 nationally televised games threw up some just extraordinary performances, given that if you go back to the first one, the Bucks-Celtics game, where there were 2 total free throws for the whole game, the Celtics became the first team in history not to take a free throw. I still can't get over that. That is, you probably won't ever see that again, ever, at least in our lifetimes. Like, that is just ridiculous. And then the Warriors, well, they came out and just shot the lights out in LA against the Lakers. No team in NBA history has shot better when attempting 40 or more threes in a game, which has happened 3,400 times in NBA history. Golden State shot 63.4% from beyond the arc, characterized by Draymond Green, 5 of 5 from deep in the first half. What were we watching? What were we honestly watching? Like, people were losing their minds. Reggie Miller on the broadcast was losing his mind. It reminded me of like Game 7, 2016 finals, which I know for Warrior fans, you know, a lot of us try to kind of wipe that from the memory. But the first half of that game, in fact, the whole game, what Draymond had 31 points or whatever else, like, he was huge and he was knocking down 3 after 3. I think he made 5 or 6 in that game. So it kind of reminded me of that. He hadn't made 5 threes in a game since 2017. So to come and see him put in 5 threes in a half, it was unbelievable. And then the Warriors, like, Draymond didn't score at all in the second half, but the Warriors continued their hot shooting. Steph, it was almost a quiet 6 of 6 from deep from Steph. Like, it was almost like you didn't really notice it until you saw the box score at the end. It was like, oh, Steph was perfect from 3, 6 of 6. And then Clay goes 5 of 10. He has a game high 27 points. And then you get like the random stuff off the bench. Pods and GP2 going 5 of 6 from 3 combined. Like, that's not going to happen again this season. Like, that is just like Pods 3 of 3, GP2 2 of 2. Wiggs had a great game. He was 3 of 5 from deep as well. So Steve said after the game, like, he said, I didn't think we played that well. The ball just kept going in and we made a million threes. And that's ultimately what it took, because I actually thought at halftime, when, you know, after Draymond has 5 threes, the Warriors put up 71 points. I was a little bit concerned that the Lakers were only down 11. I thought, geez, Draymond hits 5 threes. We put up 71. We should be up by 15 plus here at least. And then the Lakers pulled within. I think the closest they got was 5 in the third quarter. But then it felt as if anytime they tried to make a push, the Warriors responded and they went on a 10-0 run to close the third quarter there against a Laker lineup that was, I mean, once LeBron was off the floor, that was hot garbage, that Laker lineup to close the third quarter. And I think Darvin Ham has a lot to answer for there, but I suppose it is difficult when Anthony Davis was ruled out before the game with that head injury, whatever it was that he suffered a couple of days ago. So a good win for the Warriors, no doubt, taking care of business. I think once you see that AD is out, even though the game is at Crypto.com Arena, I think that's, again, no excuses for the Warriors. You just have to win it, and that's what they're doing at the moment. They're taking care of business. Aside from shooting incredibly well from 3, I didn't think it was necessarily a perfect performance. Thought some of their defensive stuff, again, wasn't great, given they gave up 120 points. However, they did have, I think they had 12 blocks in the game, so they were active at times. A couple of highlight ones, including that GP2 one in the last couple of minutes. So not a perfect game from the Warriors, but pretty much a perfect shooting display from 3-point range. Quite unbelievable, really. But, of course, the machinations that come from this, you don't really want to talk too much about the games. You just want to talk about what the result means moving forward with just 3 games left. I'll briefly touch on the game. I thought Steph was great. It was a really under control game from Steph, where he didn't have to do a whole lot scoring-wise, had 23 points, but he had, I think, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, just really under control, not too many mistakes. Looked refreshed as well, which I think is the most important thing, having been rested from that game against the Jazz the other day. So that was a really positive sign. CP3, I think we need to understand here and work out that this has worked, right? Chris Paul has been a positive to the Warriors, and I think if we look back, I like to always take a lens of looking back through history and whatever else. And the last thing I think we should do here is look back in 20, 30 years' time and say, that lone season CP3 was on the Warriors, how random was that? And he didn't really help because, you bring him in, you think, okay, we're going to get back to championship contention, and there's still a good chance the Warriors don't make the playoffs. And so if that happens, I don't want to be looking back in history and saying, that Chris Paul season at the Warriors didn't work because they didn't make the playoffs at all, which is going to be an easy kind of correlation to make. However, I think you've got to understand that this has worked, and Chris Paul was fantastic again yesterday. To have someone of his caliber to be able to run the offense when Steph's off the floor, even play next to him at times. I know if they do make the playoffs, there's going to be some defensive limitations there if they've got Steph, CP3, and Clay all out on the floor at the one time. However, you do know that if the Warriors do make the playoffs, and in the last few games of this season where it is basically playoff stakes, Steve is going to want to have those three guys out there as much as possible. And I think Chris Paul is going to be just playing more and more the deeper this season goes. However long it might be, the Warriors have got at least 4 games left because they're going to have at least one playing game. But hopefully there's a bit more to come after that with some playoff action. So a great Chris Paul game. I thought Wiggs was really good. I'm always concerned when Wiggs misses any time. It doesn't matter what it is, like if it's a game or if it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, however many games he misses, I'm always concerned about his first game back and whether or not he'll be able to rediscover the groove kind of quickly enough. And obviously at this point of the season, you can't muck around at all. And so for him, only a 2-game absence, very minor ankle issue, but for him to come out and look as good as he did, and as aggressive as he was on the offensive end, where he had 17 points, 7 of 12 shooting, 3 of 5 from deep, as I said before, I think it was a really good Wiggs game. I think it was a really good game from the Warriors all around. JK probably didn't have his best game off the bench, was limited to just 20, 21 minutes. But overall, I thought, Trace ruined my multi that was going to return $1,700. But aside from that, Trace was really good. 7 rebounds, I think 3 block shots, blocked LeBron at the rim once. Draymond was spectacular. Wiggs, Steph, Clay, Pods, GP2. Like everyone played well, aside from probably JK, it must be said, who wasn't great. His foul at the end of the first quarter on Austin Reeves was near on unforgivable. Don't know what he was doing there. But he was excellent the other day against Utah, and he still had impact. Like he still had 8, 6, and 3 in this one, so he was still productive enough. Just wasn't his best game. I think the urgency in this one was, specifically shown by the fact that Steve went back to a 9-man rotation. This was a fully healthy Warriors again, and so to have that back in place is obviously a real positive. But it does mean that Moses Moody was again out of the rotation. Disappointing, but inevitable. I think it's always looked this way over the last few months of the season, and Moses has played relatively well when he's had his opportunity. But when you get to the playoffs, or into playoff action like this is for the Warriors right now, you're clearly going to go to 9 rather than 10, I think, and that means no Moody, no Loon as well, and Saric has obviously been out of it for a few weeks here. So this is the 9 the Warriors have. This is the 9 they'll be using going forward. And it's a pretty good team, to be fair. And I'll get into that later on. But in terms of the machinations that this result has, so the first thing and the biggest thing for the Warriors is they now control their own destiny for the 9th seed. So outside of everything that happened yesterday in terms of the results, the Warriors are still 10th in the West right now. However, they do control their own destiny for 9th. So they have 3 games remaining. The Lakers have 2. That obviously means that both teams, if they win out, can be finished with the exact same record. However, the Warriors winning yesterday gives them the season series. So if they win out, will finish in the 9th seed at the very least. Now, we get down to the 8th seed here, where last episode I spoke incessantly about the Sacramento Kings and the Warriors needing their results to kind of go Golden State's way to have a chance of overtaking the Kings. It did yesterday. It didn't look like it for a while. The Kings found themselves up 19 against the Thunder in Oklahoma City. Thankfully, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and company made an heroic comeback effort in the second half, heroic from a Warrior standpoint anyway, to come back and beat the Kings there. So that means that the Kings now need to lose 2 of their last 3, where they've got the Pelicans, the Suns, and the Blazers. So it essentially means they need to lose to the Pelicans and the Suns. However, the Suns' result yesterday also means that maybe it's them, not the Kings, that the Warriors should be wishing their downfall upon. So the Suns, all of a sudden, are in a little bit of trouble, but maybe not as much trouble given some of the news we've just seen in the last hour or two. So if the Suns lose their last 3 games, which they've lost their last 2, both at home, then the Warriors can overtake them and they can finish 8th, and the Suns could still finish as low as 10th, which would be remarkable. They're at the Clippers today, at the Kings, at the Timberwolves. So on paper, that's a hard schedule. And you'd think that's actually a realistic possibility for them to lose all 3 games and for the Warriors to overtake them. However, unfortunately, the Clipper injury report for today, not good. Not good from a Golden State perspective. No James Harden, no Kawhi Leonard, no Paul George, Russell Westbrook and Ivica Zubac, both questionable. So, an incredible result yesterday where the Clippers played in Phoenix and found themselves up 38-4. I was like looking at the box score thinking, what am I saying? 38-4. And yet the Suns came back, got within single digits in the fourth quarter, eventually lost 105-92. But the chances of back-to-back Clipper victories, not great. Not great based on this injury report. And I think the Suns are $1.18. I don't know what that is in US odds where you do minus and plus, whatever it is. $1.18. So they're heavy favorites. They're heavy favorites, the Suns, even though this game is in LA. So what do we want? Well, obviously, the big game today is going to be that Suns-Clippers game. If the Suns win that one, then you really have to be hoping that they can also beat the Kings and that the Pelicans can beat the Kings as well, because I think that's still the best outcome for the Warriors. In fact, the absolute best outcome, like if the Suns were to lose today, the absolute best outcome, I think, is still for the Kings to get 7, the Warriors to get 8, and then I'd actually be fairly confident. First up matchup, go to Golden One Center, try and win that one. And if you don't, then you got a second opportunity. But at the very minimum, like the goal is obviously to get the 8 seed, because that gives you 2 chances. And whoever you play against in that first one, well, so be it. Like if it's Phoenix, it's obviously going to be tough. But it's going to be winnable, right? And you're going to have 2 opportunities, which I think is such a difference to having to play 2 one-off elimination games, particularly if one of those is against LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Like, it's wild. The Western Conference is legitimately just nuts, where you're going to have, I think, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant are the 3 greatest players in the last 15 years of NBA basketball. And one of those 3 players, most likely, will be in the 10th seed in the Western Conference, despite still being top 10, at minimum top 15 players in the league. And one of those guys, one of those legendary guys, are going to be in the 10th seed. And good chance, because I think the Pelicans are probably still favored to finish in the 6th seed, good chance all 3 of them are in the play-in tournament some way or another. So it is unbelievable. Now, there is still a chance that the Warriors can overtake the Pelicans, and that can be another way that they get a top 8 seed. So if the Pelicans lost to the Kings, the Warriors, and the Lakers, which is possible, is very possible, then the Dubs would tie the Pelicans' record with 47 wins at the end of the regular season. However, Friday's game is the tiebreaker, so if the Warriors win that, they have the tiebreaker over the Pelicans, which means they would overtake them in that scenario, I believe, because it is the 3rd game of the season between the Warriors and Pelicans. So there's all kinds of ways here that the Warriors can actually get to the 8th seed, and I don't know. I was looking at, I think it's with playoffstatus.com yesterday or something, and they've got kind of all the percentages and the likelihood of teams finishing in whatever position. I think the Warriors are 16% to finish in the 8th seed. And then, like, I don't know, 50+% or whatever to be in the 9th seed. So I think that most of the predictions expect the Warriors to win their final 3 games, and that's the most important thing for them, just to take care of business, and that means they at least get a home playing game to start if they'd have finished 9th. But we'll just wait and see what happens. It's the best time of the season, I think. These last few, like the last week, where there's so much at stake, and just the emotion that it brings, and just it's unbelievable. But it's also so stressful because you're trying to work out, what's possible and what will happen if they win this game and that team wins that game, and just the whole maths around it can be quite a puzzle to try and figure out. But it's absolutely unbelievable, and you're going to, the whole playing tournament has, credit to the NBA. I wasn't a huge fan of it to start with, and maybe that's because the first time around, first playing tournament we ever had, the Warriors finished as the 8th seed and then went bang bang, lost to the Lakers, Grizzlies out of the playoffs entirely, when for every single season before that they would have been in the playoffs. But overall, like, it makes it so much better this end of the season, where you've got so many different results that are possible, where you've got teams battling and fighting for their lives as hard as possible. So credit to the NBA for that, because it's making it truly exciting. I just wanted to end off today, right, with I was listening to Jason Timpf on Hoops Tonight. He's got a great podcast there. He was talking about the Warriors-Lakers yesterday. He's a Laker fan. He was talking about the frustration of the Lakers season, the fact they've put themselves in this position where now, they need other results their way just to get above 10th in the West. And, he was talking about the kind of overview of their season, the fact they started really well, they won the in-season tournament, and they've actually finished really well. But then they had a month after the in-season tournament where they went 3-10, and that's really ruined their entire season, which is what can happen in such a competitive Western Conference. And it got me thinking as well, because the whole time he was talking about that, I was thinking you can say the same thing about the Warriors and the frustration. And I want to say this now before the season's completely over. The frustration of what this team could have been, because, Steve Kerr was asked the other day, like, do you think this team is better than last season's team? And he said, yes, like, absolutely, better team, better chemistry, better vibes, whatever else. And he's right. He's right. However, the chances of the Warriors making the second round of the playoffs like they did last season is very low right now. Like, they are battling just to make the playoffs, let alone who they may face in the first round. And so, again, when you look back at it from a historical perspective, you might know, like, we who have lived it will know that, yes, this team, this 2023-24 team was better than the 2022-23. However, history will show that the 2022-23 team made the second round of the playoffs, got to a Game 6, and this team might not make the playoffs at all. And so the disappointment of being put in a position now where you need other results to go your way, rather than holding fate in your own hands, being locked into a top 6 seed. And the biggest thing for the Warriors in this season, which is the most disappointing aspect, is Draymond. It really is. And, Draymond played spectacularly yesterday. He's played a really, really high level when he's been on the floor this season. Like, he's been better than I could have expected, because I think there's been times in the last couple of years where Draymond's kind of dipped a little bit, and you think, is he the same physically, and therefore can he be the same defender that he's been over the last decade? Obviously, the shooting over the last 5 or 6 years before this one was going down and was on a real decline. But the fact his shooting's back up this season, back towards 40% from 3, taking a few more as well. The defense is still, like we've seen over the past couple of weeks here, like, when he's locked in, he's still, I think, the best defender in basketball, potentially, although some of the stuff Wemby's doing at the moment is just stupid. Anyway, but when you've got Draymond out there, the Warriors are still a really good team. Clay spoke about on Draymond's podcast the other day as well. But if you have a look at the Warriors without Draymond, 10-13. 10-13 in games where Draymond was suspended. Either suspended, either ramping up his training before returning after suspension, or in the 2 games where he actually had the incidents, the Gobert chokehold and the Nurkic hit where he got ejected in both games. So the 23 total games, they're 10 and 13. They are just a significantly better team with Draymond Green. I do think that you put him into those games, or at least some of those games, they probably reverse that and go at least 13 and 10. That gives them an extra 3 wins right now. They're 47. They could finish with a 50-win season. Not to mention all the games they've tricked away when they've been up 15-plus points. Was it 7 or 8 games they've been up 15-plus and then lost? Like, Steve is absolutely right. This is a much better team than last season. This is a good basketball team. And this is the thing. We're going to look back at it and say, oh, what a disappointing season. It is very disappointing, but part of that is because I think they're legitimately good. And if they do make the playoffs, no one in the West scares me aside from Denver. No, I would not go into any series in this Western Conference and think the Warriors have little to no chance, unless it's against Denver, who I think are just clearly far and away better than everyone else. And if the Warriors have to play them, then so be it. Probably won't happen in the first round necessarily, but second round Western Conference. I mean, if the Warriors make the Western Conference Finals, that's a great result. That's fantastic. But unfortunately, they've put themselves in a position where they need other results to go their way. And it's just so disappointing and frustrating given what this team could have been. Like, you look at the 2021-22 championship team, and they won 53 games. This team could have gone close to winning 53 games if Draymond didn't get suspended twice and if they just won even half the games that they found themselves in incredibly winnable positions in. So it's just I don't know, it's just frustrating. And I just want to get that out of the way now before like the season's actually over and then we do, reflect on it kind of thing. Because, we've got to live in the moment and it's just super disappointing that they've put themselves in this position. But anyway, Warriors at Portland tomorrow should be a comfortable win, you would imagine. Trailblazers letting their young guys go to work, giving a lot of usage to Scoot Henderson. DeAndre Ayton's, been pretty good for them recently, so that's probably one player the Warriors need to keep an eye on kind of thing. But, yeah, you just need to take care of business, and then we'll wait and see what happens. Obviously, this Clippers-Suns game coming up in a couple of hours now, so fingers crossed possibly that the Clippers can somehow get a win, but given that injury report, I don't like the Warriors' chances. Other than that, guys, we'll finish it up. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252, that's POK252 on Twitter/X. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and I'll be back. Don't know if it'll be after tomorrow's game, because I think the Warriors have a back-to-back with the Trailblazers, then home to the Pelicans. So I'll probably do a podcast after that one, and we'll know so much more about where the Warriors could possibly get to by the end of the regular season.